The mining tunnel was dark and cold, lit only by the soft blue glow coming from Nova's skin. Her bioluminescent markings were dim today. They always got darker when she was tired or hurt. The heavy chain around her ankle clinked against the rocky ground as she dragged another cart of ore toward the processing station. "Move faster, creature." The guard's harsh voice echoed through the tunnel. His thick boots made heavy sounds as he walked behind her. Nova knew what would happen if she didn't hurry. The scars on her back reminded her every day. Nova wasn't always a slave. Once she had been free on her home world, where the Starborn people lived peaceful lives under twin moons. But that was before the Dominion came. Before their massive ships darkened the skies and their soldiers took away anyone they could catch. That was 5 years ago. Now she was just property. Number 2749, according to the metal tag they had welded around her neck. She hadn't heard her real name spoken in so long that sometimes she wondered if she was forgetting it. The cart wheels squeaked as she pushed harder. Her arms shook from the effort, but she kept moving. Around her, other slaves, some starborn like her, others from different species, worked silently. Nobody talked here. Talking meant punishment. "Watch it, worthless." Another guard shouted as Nova's cart wobbled over a bump in the ground. Some ore spilled over the side, small crystals scattering across the floor. Her heart stopped. Spilling ore was a serious offense. The guard stomped toward her, raising his shock stick. Nova couldn't help but flinch, her markings flashing a scared white color before dimming almost completely. But before the guard could strike, a loud alarm echoed through the tunnels. "Shift change." Someone called from further down the mine. The guard growled, lowering his weapon. "Clean it up, then get to your cell. And don't think I'll forget about this tomorrow." Nova quickly gathered the spilled crystals, her hands shaking. As she placed them back in the cart, she noticed something strange through a ventilation shaft high up in the tunnel wall. A flash of light that wasn't from the mining operations. It looked like a ship, but not a Dominion vessel. This one was smaller, with a different shape she had never seen before. She wanted to look longer, but she knew better. Taking too long would only bring more pain. Nova hurried to finish her task and joined the line of slaves being herded back to their cells. The cell block was a long corridor carved into the rock, with small holes cut into the walls that served as their homes. Nova's was barely big enough for her to lie down. The front was sealed with energy bars that hummed day and night, powered by the very ore they mined. As the guards locked them in for the night, Nova curled up in her usual corner. Her whole body ached from 14 hours of work. The thin blanket they gave her did little against the cold, but she wrapped it around herself anyway. In the darkness of her cell, Nova's markings gave off a soft, sad purple glow. It was the color of loneliness, her people would say. She thought about the strange ship she had seen. In 5 years, she had never spotted a non-Dominion vessel near the mine. Nova closed her eyes, trying to find sleep before tomorrow's shift began. She didn't know it then, but that mysterious ship would change everything. Because aboard that vessel was something the Dominion had never encountered before, a human who was about to discover their secret operation. And humans, as the galaxy would soon learn, had their own ideas about slavery. Jack Wilson ran his fingers through his messy brown hair as he studied the readings on his ship's display. The Wanderer was an old salvage vessel, but her sensors were top-notch. They had to be in his line of work. Right now, those sensors were showing something that shouldn't be there. "That's definitely not on any official maps," he muttered to himself, looking at the mining operation carved into the moon's surface. Jack had been tracking a valuable piece of spacecraft wreckage when he'd stumbled across this place. Now he was hidden behind one of the moon's larger craters, watching and recording everything. Through his ship's cameras, he zoomed in on the facility's landing pad. The ships there all bore the mark of the Dominion, a species known for their aggressive expansion, but supposedly civilized now. But what caught his attention were the chains. Long lines of workers, all connected by heavy metal chains, moving in and out of the mine entrances. "Computer, magnify Section 4, Jack commanded. The screen zoomed in closer, and his jaw tightened. The workers weren't workers at all. They were slaves. Some had glowing skin that flickered like dying stars. Others had scales, fur, or features he'd never seen before. But they all wore the same haunted look. Jack knew that look. He'd seen it in the history books back on Earth. His great-grandmother had kept a photo of her own great-great-grandmother, who had been born into slavery before it was abolished. That same empty gaze stared back at him now from a dozen alien faces. "This isn't right," he said quietly, his hands gripping the control panel. Humanity had joined a galactic community only 30 years ago. They were still considered newcomers, still learning the rules. But some rules, some wrongs, were universal. As he watched, one of the glowing aliens stumbled. She was thin, probably too thin, with markings that pulsed a weak blue across her skin. The cart she was pushing tipped slightly, spilling some more. Jack's cameras caught everything that happened next. The guard's strike was quick and cruel. The alien woman fell, her markings flashing white before fading to an almost invisible dim. She didn't cry out. She didn't fight back. She just slowly picked herself up and began cleaning the spilled ore with shaking hands. Jack felt sick. His ship's computer was recording everything, documenting evidence that could be sent to authorities. But bureaucracy moved slowly, and from what he'd seen of galactic politics, many species would debate endlessly while doing nothing. Meanwhile, people suffered. He thought about his own small arsenal, tools of the salvage trade, technically, but useful for other things. He thought about the ship's medical bay, basic but equipped to handle various species. He thought about the extra space in his cargo hold and the false compartments he'd installed for valuable salvage. "Computer, start mapping facility patrol patterns," Jack ordered, sitting up straighter in his pilot's chair. "And give me everything you can find about Dominion security systems." The computer beeped in acknowledgement, screens filling with data. Jack began to study them carefully. He wasn't a soldier or a hero. He was just a salvage operator who'd taken a wrong turn. But his grandmother used to tell him stories about the Underground Railroad, about ordinary people who decided they couldn't live with themselves if they just flew away and pretended they hadn't seen anything. "Well," Jack said to himself as he began making plans, "I guess some traditions are worth keeping alive." In the facility below, Nova had no idea that the strange ship she glimpsed belonged to a species that had once torn itself apart to end slavery. She didn't know that humans could be the most dangerous force in the galaxy when they saw something they believed was wrong. But she was about to find out. Jack lay flat on his stomach in a ventilation shaft, watching the guards change shifts through a small grate. For 5 days, he had been studying the mining facility's patterns, learning its weaknesses. His ship's computer had mapped every patrol route, every camera blind spot. "Guard rotation in 30 seconds, his earpiece whispered. Jack had programmed his ship's AI to track everything. Below him, 3 guards walked past, complaining about their shift in their harsh language. In his pocket, he felt the small device he had built. Tomorrow it would create the biggest explosion this facility had ever seen, but without actually hurting anyone. Jack smiled slightly. Sometimes, the best weapons were just lights and noise. Meanwhile, deep in the mines, Nova was having the worst day since her capture. The guard who had caught her spilling ore hadn't forgotten. He had assigned her to the deepest tunnel, where the air was so thin it made her dizzy. "Faster," the guard shouted, striking the ground near her feet with his shock stick. Nova's markings had been dim gray all day, the color of exhaustion. Her hand shook as she lifted another heavy rock. Next to her, an older starborn collapsed. Without thinking, Nova reached to help him. The guard's shock stick hit her back instantly. "No helping," he snarled. "Each slave works alone." Nova fell to her knees, pain shooting through her body. But something was different today. As she looked at the fallen elder, whose markings were barely glowing at all, she felt a new feeling breaking through her fear. anger. Above them both, hidden in the maintenance tunnels, Jack watched the scene through his camera. His jaw tightened. The rescue couldn't wait another day. The original plan had been to study the facility for a full week, but seeing Nova's treatment made him change his mind. "Computer," he whispered, "move Operation Breakout to tomorrow morning. Alert pattern shows fewer guards at shift change." Looking through his binoculars, Jack counted the security cameras again. He had discovered that they ran on the same power grid as the cell's energy bars. One good surge would knock them all out. That night, Nova lay in her cell, her back still burning from the shock stick. Through her tiny window, she saw the strange ship again, moving between the asteroids. She had seen it several times now, always staying just out of the facility's sensor range. Something was different about that ship. The way it moved, the way it watched. Nova didn't dare hope, but she couldn't help wondering. In the Wanderer's cargo hold, Jack finished checking his equipment one last time. Shock stick jammers that would turn the guards' weapons useless. Smoke makers that would fill corridors with harmless but thick fog. Chain cutters that could break through any restraint. He had also prepared his medical bay. Research showed that starborn people healed quickly with proper care. The other species would need help too, but his computer had downloaded basic medical information for all known slave races in the facility. Final patrol approaching, his computer warned. Jack watched through his screens as the night shift guards made their rounds. Soon, they would be tired, less alert. That would be his chance. Nova couldn't sleep. The pain in her back kept her awake, but there was something else too. A feeling she couldn't explain. The air felt different, like the moment before a storm. She watched her fellow slaves in nearby cells. Many were new, replacing those who hadn't survived the harsh conditions. Nova knew she might be next. The work was getting harder, the guards crueler. She wasn't sure how much longer she could last. But tomorrow would change everything. While Nova tried to find sleep in her cold cell, Jack was making final adjustments to his rescue plan. Neither knew that in less than 12 hours, their lives would be forever connected in a daring escape that would shake the foundations of the Dominion slave empire. The explosion rocked the entire mining facility. Alarms screamed through every corridor as smoke filled the northern tunnel. Guards ran toward the blast, leaving only two behind to watch the slave cells, exactly as Jack had planned. Nova pressed herself against the back wall of her cell as chaos erupted around her. The other slaves were doing the same, their eyes wide with fear. They had seen revolts before. They never ended well. Suddenly, the power flickered. Once, twice, then darkness. The energy bars containing them vanished. In the pitch black, Nova's natural glow and those of other starborn cast eerie shadows on the walls. Heavy footsteps approached. Nova's markings pulsed with fear, turning a pale white. But instead of a guard's harsh voice, she heard something different. Words in a language she didn't know, spoken softly. A figure appeared at her cell. Not a guard. This one was shaped differently, wearing strange clothing and carrying unusual weapons. In the dim light from her markings, Nova could see it was the same species she'd glimpsed through her cell's small window earlier. "It's okay," the creature said in broken Standard Galactic. "I'm here to help. I'm human. Name Jack." Nova didn't move. It had to be a trick. The guards sometimes played cruel games with their hopes. But then Jack did something no guard had ever done. He waited. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He just stood there, hand extended. More explosions sounded in the distance. "Not much time," Jack said quietly. "But choice yours. Freedom or stay. You choose." Freedom. The word hit Nova like a physical force. How long had it been since anyone had given her a choice about anything? Somewhere above, heavy doors were slamming. The guards would be back soon. Nova looked at Jack's extended hand, then at the open cell door. Slowly, shakily, she stood. "Others," she whispered in Standard Galactic. "Help others too." Jack nodded, already moving to the next cell. plan is everyone. But fast, very fast. Nova found herself helping, showing other slaves it was safe to come out. Some could barely walk. Jack pulled out tools and quickly broke their chains, working with practiced speed. Intruder in cell block C. A guard's voice boomed through the corridor. All units respond. Time go, Jack said, raising his weapon. Stay close. Follow. He led them through passages Nova had never seen, using the maintenance tunnels that ran behind the main corridors. Whenever guards appeared, strange devices from Jack's belt would create distractions, smoke, noise, confusion. They were almost to the surface when everything went wrong. A full squad of guards appeared ahead of them, weapons raised. Nova's heart stopped. This was it. They would all be punished terribly for this attempt. But Jack didn't hesitate. He threw something that created a blinding flash, then charged forward. Nova watched in amazement as the human moved with incredible speed, disarming guards with moves she'd never seen before. His fighting style was completely foreign to their captors, who couldn't predict his attacks. Run, Jack shouted between strikes. Ship ahead. Door open. Through the chaos, Nova saw it. A ship unlike any Dominion vessel, its cargo ramp lowered and waiting. Freedom was only meters away. They ran. Some helped others who were too weak. Nova found herself supporting an elderly starborn she'd never spoken to, but had seen in the mines. Behind them, Jack was holding off the guards, giving them time. Nova's feet hit the ramp. The ship's interior was warm, clean, so different from the cold mines. More explosions rocked the facility as Jack sprinted up the ramp, hitting controls to close it. Hold tight, he yelled, running to the cockpit. The ship roared to life, lifting off as weapon fire sparked against its hull. As they broke through the moon's atmosphere, Nova looked down at her broken chains, then at the human who had risked everything to save them. Her markings glowed a color she hadn't shown in years, the bright blue of hope. 3 days had passed since their escape. Nova sat in the ship's small medical bay, watching as Jack treated another former slave's injuries. Her markings glowed a gentle green, a color of curiosity she hadn't felt safe showing in years. All done, Jack said to the patient, speaking slowly in standard galactic. Rest now. Food comes soon. The concept of food comes soon was still strange to Nova and the others. In the mines, they ate only when the guards decided. But on the Wanderer, Jack had set up regular mealtimes. 3 times every day cycle, without fail. Nova touched the spot where her chain collar had been. Jack had removed it the first day, using careful movements and strange tools. He had talked softly the whole time, explaining what he was doing, always asking permission before touching anyone. Nova. Jack's voice brought her out of her memories. Help me. Need translate for others. She nodded. Over the past days, she had started helping Jack communicate with those who didn't speak standard galactic well. It felt good to be useful without being forced. Together, they moved through the ship's cargo hold, now converted into a temporary shelter for 28 escaped slaves. Jack had given them all blankets, clothes, and something he called privacy screens, simple barriers they could use to create their own space. Tell them, Jack said. Next stop safe station. Friends there. Doctors, food, new starts. Nova translated this into 3 different languages. As she spoke, she noticed her fellow escapees' reactions. Some looked scared, others hopeful. A young starborn child's markings flickered with excitement, the first time Nova had seen such a display since their rescue. Later, in the ship's small kitchen area, Jack showed Nova how to use something called a coffee maker. He had learned she was fascinated by human devices and had started teaching her about them. Why? Nova asked suddenly, her markings shifting to a questioning blue. Why help us? Dangerous for you. No profit. Jack was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee. On Earth, human homeworld, we had slavery too. Long time ago. Very bad time. Many humans fought to end it. Many died to end it. He paused, looking for words. Now, when we see slavery, can't ignore, can't pretend not see. Nova thought about this as she sipped her own drink, something Jack called hot chocolate that had quickly become her favorite. But you just one human, she said. Others might not care. Jack smiled. One person can start change. Like small stone makes big waves in water. He pulled out a small device, a tablet, and showed her images of human history, pictures of people who had fought against slavery, who had hidden escaped slaves, who had worked to change laws. See, he said, all start with one person saying no more. That night, Nova couldn't sleep. She wandered to the ship's observation window, watching the stars streak by. Her markings glowed with a new color, a deep, steady purple that her people used to show deep thinking. She thought about Jack's words, about choices and changes and saying, no more, about how he treated them not as property to be owned, but as people to be helped. In the window's reflection, she saw Jack approaching. He didn't say anything, just stood nearby, offering silent company. Nova realized she wasn't flinching anymore when he came close, wasn't watching him for signs of anger, wasn't afraid. Jack, she said softly, can you teach me more? About humans, about freedom. His smile was warm. Of course. Where want start? Everything, Nova said, her markings brightening with determination. Want learn everything. Want help others too. Like you. For the first time since her rescue, Nova felt something beyond just being free. She felt purpose. And as Jack began telling her about human concepts like human rights and dignity, her markings glowed with a color she had almost forgotten, the bright gold of hope for the future. Nova woke up screaming, her markings flashing bright white with terror. In her dreams, she had been back in the mines, the guard's shock sticks burning her skin. But this time, as she opened her eyes, she wasn't in a cold cell. Instead, she was in her small room aboard the Wanderer. The door chimed softly. Nova. Okay. Jack's voice came through the speaker. He never entered without permission, not even when he heard screams. Yes, come in, she answered, her markings slowly settling to a calmer blue. Jack entered with 2 cups of hot chocolate. It had become their routine after nightmares. Want talk about it? Before Nova could answer, the ship's alarm started blaring. They rushed to the bridge, where the computer was showing 3 Dominion warships closing in from different directions. They found us, Nova whispered, her markings pulsing with fear again. The other rescued slaves were gathering in the corridor, their faces showing the same terror she felt. But Jack remained calm. Computer, activate countermeasures, he ordered. Nova, remember what we practiced. She nodded, taking the co-pilot's seat. Over the past weeks, Jack had been teaching her about ship operations. Now she understood why. Her fingers moved across the control panel, activating the systems Jack had installed specifically for escaping pursuit. Launching decoys, she announced. Small pods shot out from the Wanderer, each one broadcasting a copy of their ship's signature. The Dominion ships would see 20 identical targets instead of 1. Good, Jack said, his hand steady on the controls. Now, watch this. He pulled the ship into a complex series of maneuvers, using a nearby asteroid field for cover. Nova watched in amazement as he flew between rocks that seemed too close together to navigate. How? She started to ask. Humans good at thinking different ways, Jack explained as he flew. Dominion ships bigger, stronger, but they think straight lines. We think. He spun the ship around an asteroid, using its gravity to increase their speed. Curves. The pursuing ships tried to follow but couldn't match the Wanderer's agility. One of them scraped against an asteroid, damaging its hull. As they gained distance from their pursuers, Nova noticed something on the scanner. Jack, look. Another mining facility. Like the one. She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. The readings showed the same type of operation where she had been held slave. More people suffering, she said softly. Her markings shifted to a deep, determined red. We have to help them. Jack looked at her with pride. Dangerous. Could get caught. You risked everything to save us, Nova replied. Taught me about human history, about helping others even when scared. She straightened in her chair. I want be like that. Want be brave. A slow smile spread across Jack's face. Then let's make plan. But first, he pressed some buttons, and Nova watched as all the data they had gathered about the Dominion slave operation began transmitting to multiple locations across the galaxy. What that? She asked. Evidence. Sending to every free world, news station, and rights group in galaxy. Dominion can chase us, but can't stop truth now. Nova's markings glowed bright gold with hope and determination. The nightmare that had woken her seemed far away now. She wasn't that helpless slave anymore. She was becoming something new, someone who could fight back. Teach me more, she said. Want learn everything about helping others escape. Want learn fight too. Jack nodded. Okay. Start with ship systems. Then self-defense. Then, he grinned, then we show Dominion why humans have reputation for causing trouble when see something wrong. As they planned their next move, Nova realized that the chains that had once bound her weren't just physical. The strongest chains had been in her mind, making her believe she was powerless. But now, those chains were breaking too, replaced by something stronger. Courage. The Wanderer hovered silently in the shadow of a large moon, its systems running in stealth mode. Inside, Nova stood before the 28 freed slaves who had become her family over the past months. Today we free more of our people, she said, her markings glowing with confidence. Her standard galactic was much better now, thanks to Jack's teaching. Each of you has choice. Stay on ship or help. Both okay. To her surprise, every single one of them stepped forward. Even the elderly Starborn she had helped during their escape raised his hand. Their time with Jack had changed them all. Jack entered the room, carrying what he called rescue gear, tools and devices designed to break chains and disable security systems. Everyone ready? Nova nodded, checking her own equipment. She wasn't the scared slave anymore. Now she wore proper clothes, carried tools, and knew how to defend herself. Jack had taught her well. The plan was bigger this time. While they had been hiding and training, Jack's evidence about Dominion slavery had spread across the galaxy. Today, as they attacked this new mining facility, resistance groups on 12 other worlds would strike similar operations. The Dominion couldn't stop them all. Ships approaching. The computer announced. 5 minutes to position. These weren't Dominion ships. They were allies, people from free worlds who had seen the evidence and chosen to help. Jack's simple act of saving one group of slaves had started something much larger. Nova took her position at the ship's controls. She was Jack's co-pilot now, equal partner in their mission. The Wanderer led 3 other ships toward the facility, using the same asteroid field tactics Jack had taught her. The battle was fierce but quick. While the other ships engaged the facility's defenses, the Wanderer slipped through their distraction. Nova and Jack, along with their trained team, entered through maintenance tunnels just like before. But this time was different. This time, when they reached the slave cells, Nova was the one who stepped forward first. Her glowing markings made her visible to the scared prisoners in the darkness. We were slaves too, she told them, her voice strong and clear. Now we are free. Come with us. More explosions rocked the facility. But these weren't just from their attack. Slave operations across 3 systems were being hit simultaneously. The Dominion's dark secret was being dragged into the light. They met resistance on their way out. A squad of guards blocked their path, led by one Nova recognized. The same guard who had beaten her for dropping ore so long ago. Property belongs to Dominion, he snarled. Nova stepped forward, her markings blazing bright. No, we belong to ourselves. The fight was short. Nova moved like Jack had taught her, quick and unpredictable. The guard didn't expect a former slave to know how to fight back. His shock was the last thing Nova saw before she knocked him unconscious. They got everyone to the ships just as planetary defense forces arrived. But these forces weren't there to stop them. The evidence Jack had spread had reached even here. Local authorities were turning against the Dominion, arresting the slave operators. Later, safe in hyperspace, Nova stood at the Wanderer's observation window. Her markings reflected in the glass showed a color she had created herself, a mix of gold for hope and bright blue for freedom. Jack joined her, offering her usual hot chocolate. "Good job today, partner." Nova smiled. "Learn from best teacher." She looked at the freed slaves being tended to by her teammates, former slaves themselves, now rescuers. What next? "Many more facilities," Jack said. "Many more people to free. Galaxy changing, but change takes time." "Then we keep fighting," Nova said firmly. "Keep helping. Keep teaching others what you taught me." Jack nodded. Together. Nova touched the window, watching the stars streak by. Once she had been property, a number in a Dominion mine. Now she was a rescuer, a fighter, a teacher. And she was just one of many. Across the galaxy, others like her were rising up, breaking chains, helping others find freedom. All because one human had decided to stop and help when he saw something wrong. Together, Nova agreed, her markings shining like stars. Until all chains break.